in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staff...
Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you've done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty, and then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court. And as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. We have worked together for years in a bipartisan way to advance U.S. interests and fund those programs. So with respect to my colleagues, how long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Are we going to roll over as Trump tramples our laws and undermines our U.S. leadership, burns down what we have spent decades building, and let millions of people across our globe suffer and die? Or are we going to stand up, push back, assert our constitutional power of the purse? And to my colleagues on both sides, this is the moment to decide whether this committee continues to be a powerful bipartisan force, a force that I think we've all been proud of for a very long time, a force that is focused on safety and economic strength and national security, focused on leading the world in research and development and countering China and others with our soft power and our military power. Every single member of this committee knows what we are risking by letting this administration tear down so much. On USAID and other programs, we can always talk about how we can make things work better and other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first of all, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond to them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would
false.
just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
Well, what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent
funding
them.
details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them.
No.
But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200+ offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and empowerment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled, and I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out, so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information when you put together a budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
In the final moments of this hearing, the room seemed to tighten around a single exchange, a confrontation shaped by accusation, defiance, and the unmistakable tension of two worldviews colliding. Senator Patty Murray, with a tone sharpened by frustration and duty, laid out a sweeping indictment against Secretary Marco Rubio. She accused him of overreach, of freezing programs Congress had already funded, of collapsing agencies without authority, and of ignoring the legal guardrails that define the limits of executive power. She accused him of actions she called outright illegal. Actions that, she said, created chaos, left global partners abandoned, and weakened the very structure of American leadership abroad. And then, just as the weight of those claims settled over the chamber, Secretary Rubio fired back. Calm, firm, unyielding. He rejected almost everything she had said. 99% of it, he insisted, was simply untrue. He said nothing illegal had taken place. He said Congress had been briefed. He said the administration had provided answers. And he insisted that every request for information would eventually be met, in time, on their terms. It was a moment that captured the heart of the struggle unfolding in Washington today. Two competing stories, two competing realities standing face to face in a single committee room. One side warning of institutions being torn down. The other insisting the system was working as intended. One side arguing that leadership requires accountability. The other arguing that leadership requires transformation. And stuck between them is the question every American must confront. What happens to democracy when each branch believes it alone is protecting the truth? As Senator Murray spoke, she painted a picture of an administration willing to halt aid, shutter offices, leave diplomats in limbo, and freeze funds already approved by law. She warned that these actions didn't just disrupt agencies, they destabilized lives, communities, even entire regions that rely on American engagement. Her message was unmistakable. When government abandons its responsibilities, the world feels it. And yet, Secretary Rubio's response revealed a different layer of this conflict. a refusal to accept the premise that the administration had crossed any legal or constitutional lines. To him, the accusations were political, exaggerated, distorted. He pushed back point by point, refusing to concede even the language of the criticism. He insisted the administration had acted properly, had kept Congress informed, had followed the rules as they understood them. These two perspectives, delivered with such conviction, show the deeper truth beneath the surface. The United States is in a defining moment where the boundaries of authority are being tested, stretched, and contested. The power of Congress, the discretion of the executive branch, the meaning of oversight, the reach of the purse. These are not abstract questions. They are the foundation of how a republic functions. And what we saw today was not just disagreement, it was a clash over the soul of constitutional governance. Senator Murray issued a warning, not just to the secretary before her, but to every member of that committee. How long will Congress remain silent while executive power expands beyond its intended limits? How long before the legislative branch, the people's branch, decides to reassert the authority that the Constitution gives it? Her words were not gentle. They were not diplomatic. They were a challenge to her colleagues to decide whether they still believed in the system they swore to protect. She reminded them that American leadership is not just about strength abroad. It is about stability at home. That when agencies are hollowed out, when programs are frozen without explanation, when decisions are made in secrecy rather than cooperation, the consequences ripple far beyond Washington. Allies lose trust, workers lose jobs, communities lose support, and America loses something even greater, its moral voice on the global stage. Rubio, for his part, argued that the administration's actions were necessary, justified, and rooted in law. He dismissed Murray's claims as inaccurate. He said the government had followed proper procedures. He said Congress would get what it needed. But beneath the firmness was an unmistakable truth. He offered few specifics, few details, few explanations. And that gap is where the uncertainty remains. The hearing ended not with resolution, but with an uneasy silence. The kind that settles when the conflict isn't finished, when the questions aren't answered, when the truth is still being formed. Because today's exchange wasn't just about funding or agencies, it was about something larger, the future of American accountability. In that room, we watched two senators fight over more than a policy dispute. We watched them fight over what kind of nation the United States chooses to be. One where power remains transparent, or one where power becomes untethered. One where oversight is respected, or one where oversight is treated as optional. One where the Constitution is honored in action, not just in speeches. This moment reminds us that democracy depends not on agreement, but on responsibility. It depends on leaders who respect the limits of their power and on citizens who demand that respect. It depends on truth, not the version each side prefers, but the version grounded in evidence, law, and accountability. What happened today was a warning and a test of whether the institutions built over generations can withstand the pressures of a divided age. A test of whether Congress still sees itself as a co-equal branch, or whether it has grown too accustomed to stepping aside. A test of whether the American people will continue to watch, to question, to demand clarity, or whether silence will become the new normal. This country has faced moments like this before. Moments when leadership clashed with oversight, when authority clashed with law, when vision clashed with responsibility, and in each of those moments, the people made the difference. That is true again today. If you believe in accountability, if you believe in transparency, if you believe in the idea that no leader stands above the Constitution, then your voice matters now more than ever. This is why we tell these stories. This is why Liberty Report USA exists, to bring clarity to the chaos, to shine light where power prefers darkness, and to remind every American that the truth is not a partisan weapon. It is a public right. So stay informed, stay engaged. And if you stand with us in the fight for government that answers to the people, then support our work. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Because the battle for accountability has only just begun.